Hi, unruly anime family. Our story begins as a student. I must choose between three girls to inherit a temple. Uryuu Kamihate is a student trying to get into medical school. After being taken in by the head priest, he discovers that he must marry one of the three priests, the sisters, if he wants to inherit the Amagami shrine, which is where he's headed at this very moment. According to Uryuu, marriage is one of the connections that bind humans like a thread of fate, much like the connections we share with family. And now, with the new life he's about to begin, as he enters the shrine with his nose buried in a book, two visitors remark to each other that this boy must be praying to pass some exam. But Uryuu is far from relying on any divine intervention to achieve his goals. He doesn't even believe in gods. When he opens the door and calls out for someone, there's no response, so he wanders through the rooms of the house, searching for any sign of life to welcome him. In theory, the head priest should be quite old, so maybe he just can't hear from far away. But as Uryuu walks through the place, he hears feminine voices behind a door and decides not to open it, not wanting to be seen as a pervert. Just as he thinks that, three maidens appear, not wearing much clothing. One of them offers her hand to the boy, as he had fallen backward from the shop. But since he doesn't respond, the girls return to their room and Uryuu decides to pretend he saw nothing. However, the girls come back now fully dressed, and the red-haired one is furious, ready to exact revenge on the insolent guy, throwing salt on him to purify him. The black-haired girl thinks they should tend to the boy who's now bleeding, while the blue-haired one is surprised that people still get nosebleeds when they're startled. Once the initial shock wears off, the four of them gather, and Uryuu explains that he'll be living there from now on and says it's a pleasure to meet the priestesses. The redhead, however, asks if his pleasure comes from spying on innocent maidens changing clothes. Though Uryuu tries to justify that it was an accident, she doesn't let up and remains furious. Putting that aside, he asks where the head priest is. The black-haired girl, visibly the most welcoming, informs him that he'll only arrive tomorrow and introduces herself as Yi Amagami, assuring the boy he can count on her as she's the eldest at 20 years old. The blue-haired one chimes in saying that Yi might be the oldest, but she's also the most childish. On the other hand, being the youngest, Asahi Amagami expects to be pampered by Uryuu and treated like a little sister as she's only 14. Lastly, Yuna Amagami, at the ripe age of 17, exclaims that she still hasn't accepted the intruder as a family member, as she dislikes the idea of men living there. Uryuu doesn't care about her opinion because he came to study, not to play house with his English vocabulary book. He just wants his space to focus on reading, nothing more. Seeing that, Yuna stands up and promises to keep an eye on the outsider, saying he'd better behave if he wants to eat. Also, she intentionally gets his name wrong just to annoy him, leaving him visibly frustrated. Next, Yi shows him his new room after personally cleaning it, though the closet is an absolute mess. While trying to pull out the futon mattress from the back, the girl ends up causing the clutter to fall on top of her, and Uryuu ends up serving as her cushion. When Yuna arrives to see what all the noise was, she finds her sister on top of the guy's face and decides to punish him with aggression, assuming he's a pervert. After all that chaos, Uryuu finally gets a moment of peace to focus on his studies. But it seems Asahi isn't willing to leave him alone. She thinks it's the perfect time for the two of them to get to know each other better. But Uryuu tells her to back off like she's some kind of pest. Asahi gets offended, thinking that as a beautiful girl, being shooed away by a guy is ridiculous, so she questions whether he's really a man. Since he doesn't respond directly, she looks for a girly magazine in the noble boy's suitcase, tossing his clothes around like there's no tomorrow. Uryuu tries to stop her, but he trips over one of the discarded garments and ends up falling on top of her. Of course, Yuna walks in at that exact moment and sees Uryuu in yet another compromising position. Naturally, the redhead gives him another beating. Sometime later, Uryuu can no longer focus on his studies, so he decides to wash his face to clear his mind. As he crosses the hallway, he notices a slightly open door and peers in to see if anyone is still awake. Inside, he finds Yuna passed out on the floor without a blanket. When the girl sneezes, he decides to cover her, but she wakes up at the worst possible moment and assumes he's up to no good. Yuna struggles and kicks the poor guy, causing him to fall on top of her. Asahi and Yi rush into the room after being awakened by the noise, and we can already imagine the scene. Uryuu is on top of the redhead again, but instead of reacting the same way, the other two girls just close the door and apologize for interrupting. Uryuu tries to convince them it was an accident, but once again he's ignored. After yet another incident, the four of them gather again, and Uryuu asks what Yuna was doing up so late. Yi explains that her sister was hand-making charms, and the redhead warns him not to touch the papers or they'll lose their sacred power. Uryuu then asks why she puts so much effort into making these charms for visitors when she doesn't even make money from it, to which she replies that it's natural for them to do so. Asahi further explains that the three sisters connect the deities with the people who pray to them, because that's a priestess's duty to grant protection so that miracles can happen. Uryuu then asks why all three of them wear red cords, and Ye reveals that these cords were left to them by their mother, even though they can no longer see her since she's passed on. Yuna believes these cords unite their feelings with their mothers. According to Asahi, it's like a treasure to them. Changing the subject, the redhead asks why the young man is still awake at this hour, to which he responds that he's been studying to get into Kyoto's medical school. Yuna is surprised, having thought he was just a rude pervert, while the older one assures him that the deities of the shrine grant success in passing exams. Besides, this is the time of wish fulfillment, known as the Rain of Wishing Stars. According to an ancient legend, on spring nights when the stars fall, if you bathe in the stardust rain, your wish will come true as long as you pray to the deities every day. Upon hearing this, Uryuu laughs and says it's ridiculous because the meteor showers this time of year are small in scale and disintegrate in the atmosphere before reaching Earth. Even if one did land, it would just crush anyone with the impacts. That's why Uryuu thinks for someone to believe in such nonsense, their brain must be melted. Hearing this, Yuna loses her temper and threatens to curse the newcomer, and Yi has to hold her back. The next day, Uryuu continues his argument that amulets and prayers don't work, and since a priest's job is to connect people with the deities, he could never imagine himself in that role. Seeing Yuna struggling to communicate with a child in English at the shrine, he steps in and tells the child in her own language to take the talisman and take good care of it. After the little girl leaves, Uryuu remarks to Yuna that she should study more English to better welcome foreign visitors, and he offers to help her with that. Yuna is initially annoyed, but later admits he helped her and agrees to work on her English. Right after, a strong wind blows toward them, and a bird flies past Yuna, carrying away the hair tie left to her by her mother. She asked her sisters to help look for the tie, but the afternoon was ending, and they hadn't found anything. The sisters assured her that the deities would help, but Uryuu, tired of the talk, said that someone's wishes won't come true just because they pray. Yuna retorted with equal intensity, saying the deities would never abandon anyone asking for help. After the girls calmed the argument, Yuna told him he didn't belong here and walked away. Back in his room, Uryuu figured it was best to stay away from the redhead. Shortly after, Asahi and Yi knocked and entered, but he wasn't there. The older one found a picture of him with his mother. From what their grandfather had told them, Uryuu lost his mother when he was very young and grew up in an orphanage. Putting the pieces together, they assumed he must have prayed to the deities every day. But his wish never came true, which is why he's an atheist, believing that only people's efforts can change their reality. Asahi joked that Uryuu was similar to Yuna because both hide their true feelings, and the middle sister overheard this part. Meanwhile, Uryuu was doing everything he could to find the tie the bird had taken, seeking redemption after their argument, but had no luck. Dirty and exhausted, he remembered the girls praying and asking the deities for guidance. Similarly, Yuna was searching for her beloved tie until she saw the young man praying at the shrine for her to find her treasure. Happy, she approached and commented that speaking the wish out loud helps the deities hear it. They both apologized to each other, and Yuna said that since he showed respect to the deities, he had met the requirements to live at the shrine. Yi and Asahi arrived shortly after, having searched for both of them, and while the older one was relieved they'd returned alive, the younger one teased that it was just a couple on a late-night date. This time, Uryuu cracked a brief smile and joined the women in heading back. He remembered the tie was still missing, but Yi said they could look for it more carefully later, and since Yuna and he had made their wishes to the deities, a miracle might happen. Upon hearing this, Uryuu noticed the sky had completely changed, and the flying cherry blossom petals had taken on a brilliant glow. In that moment, he was certain it was the rain of wishing stars, though he still didn't think there was anything miraculous about it, chalking it up to cherry blossoms and meteors falling simultaneously and creating the effect. Yuna commented that he was really boring, and Asahi added that he must be a blast on dates. In any case, they urged him to take a closer look and decide for himself if it seemed like a miracle. and he admitted that it did a little. With that, they made their way home, and the missing tie was lifted from the bird's nest and fell right back onto Yuna's head the next day. Hidori Amagami, the high priest, finally arrived at the shrine and apologized for the delay, taking advantage of Uryuu's presence for marriage. Hidori no longer needed to worry about who would inherit the shrine after his passing. Uryuu was shocked by this declaration, having had no idea this was in the plans, but the old man continued to explain that Uryuu would need to marry one of his 3 granddaughters. I appreciate you viewing my anime recap, Unruly Family. Please let me know what you think about this anime recap by liking, sharing, and commenting, and please subscribe to the channel to help us reach 5,000 subscribers.